Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where sweating wasn't just a side effect of the summer heat. It was a strategy. You're in London. Foggy, damp, a little grimy. But somewhere behind the fog, through a narrow stone alley that smells faintly of coal smoke and horse droppings, is a flickering lantern outside a bathhouse. It's no ordinary public washroom. This place caters to the wealthy, the ones who have the time and coin to care deeply about what the mirror says. Inside, you're greeted by thick clouds of steam. The walls drip with condensation. Attendants, gaunt young men in rolled-up sleeves, move swiftly between curtained chambers, each one radiating heat like a forge. You're handed a towel and a warning. The first 10 minutes are the worst. After that, your heartbeat slows or quickens, depending. Charming. Your chamber is no larger than a wardrobe. A brass stove crackles in the corner, pushing hot air through a narrow vent aimed directly at your knees. You sit down, awkwardly naked beneath a thin towel, and immediately feel your lungs protest. Your scalp begins to bead, then your cheeks, then your knees, then your earlobes. You're sweating in places you didn't know had sweat glands. You're not alone. Next door, a woman hums softly, probably trying to distract herself from the sensation of slowly poaching in her own juices. And beyond her, a row of other hopefuls, aristocrats, aging ballerinas, debutantes with no appetite but plenty of ambition. Everyone here has one goal: to melt. This is the Victorian Turkish bath boom, a trend imported and adapted by British wellness enthusiasts who believed heat could purge impurities, slim the figure, and even soothe melancholy. And it wasn't limited to one-off visits. Some members came daily, logging hours of sweat time like it was part of a sacred ritual. The theory was simple, if slightly sweaty. Weight, they said, was just excess water. Evaporate the water, and you evaporate the shame. Never mind that the minute you drank anything again, it came back. These were not facts anyone wished to consider. They came here for results, or at least for visible suffering. In the hallway, you hear the distinct clatter of someone fainting. No one rushes in. It's oddly normal here. One of the attendants leans round the curtain and offers you a slice of lemon to sniff. "Perks you right up," he says, though he looks bored. You take it, because you're not sure your legs will work if you try to stand. The hottest chambers are rumoured to go well above 120 degrees Fahrenheit. A little sign above your head says, "Sweat is the tears of your fat." Someone scratched out the word tears and wrote funeral. That feels more accurate. Strangely enough, this wasn't the only sweat solution on offer. Some enthusiasts bought at-home sweat boxes, wooden cabinets where only your head poked out while the rest of you cooked. Others simply wore thick flannel in July and called it controlled perspiration. Fashion, function, and fainting blended freely in the name of shedding pounds. By the time the session ends, your fingers are shriveled, your head pounds, and you've lost nearly 3 pounds of water. The attendant hands you a silk robe and a cup of beef broth. "Don't drink it too fast," he says, "or you'll undo all that fine work." You wobble back out into the street, half drunk on dehydration and illusion. Your skin is red, your hair soaked, and your soul a little lighter, though it may just be lightheadedness, and yet tomorrow you'll be back. After all, everyone else is. You don't sleep well that night. Your legs throb like boiled sausages, and the sheets feel like sandpaper on your scalded skin. But the morning sun creeps through the soot-streaked glass, and like so many others, you feel the stirrings of resolve. Maybe it worked. Maybe this time you're thinner, lighter, lovelier. So of course you return. Day 2. You recognise faces. Hollow-eyed regulars who know which booth has the least mildew, which attendant lets you stay in longer than the recommended time. There's a woman named Mrs. Pencombe, late 50s, Jules even in the bathhouse, who insists she sweated off her widow's grief last season. A wiry man with a moustache like a falcon's feather claims the steam healed his gout, his gallstones, and his romantic shame. Everyone has a testimonial. Everyone is sweating out sins and sandwiches, and then there's the private room. You hear rumours. The electric steam chamber, they whisper. Queen Victoria's cousin tried it once, said it changed her life. Naturally you want in. It costs triple. But how can you say no? Inside it's a mechanical marvel, a coffin-shaped contraption with copper coils, pressure gauges, and a smell of scorched linen. You're wrapped in wool and sealed in like a Victorian pastry. A lever is pulled, a hiss, a hum, and then heat, fast, dry, and terrifying. No fog, no gentle steam, just raw, baking intensity, as if someone stuck a tea kettle in your bloodstream. Halfway through, your ears ring. You imagine your fat sizzling like bacon. One woman claimed she saw visions of her childhood while inside. Another supposedly coughed up a bad memory. Whether it's science or hallucination, who's to say? The results, they insist, are real. When they finally crack the chamber open, your robe clings to you like seaweed. Your knees wobble. Your reflection, flushed, soaked, glowing, stares back from a tarnished mirror. Did you lose anything? Maybe an inch, maybe your dignity. Either way, you feel reborn, or possibly half dead. It's hard to tell the difference in here. Later, sipping tepid tea in the lounge, you overhear a conversation about thermal balance. A woman in violet lace insists she's not eating at all anymore, just steaming. Food is for the unsophisticated, she mutters. Someone nods, and so the trend continues. This was the golden age of sweater salvation. Turkish baths popped up from Edinburgh to Brighton. Even in New York the fashion took root. For a time, to be seen sweating, elegantly of course, not like a stable boy, was a mark of refinement. You weren't lazy, you were committed. Of course, doctors disagreed. Many warned of fainting, heart strain, and nervous disturbances of the female type. But those voices were muffled beneath layers of towels and the rush of boiling water. Society had decided sweat was slimming. Eventually, the fad gave way to newer cures. But for a brief, steaming moment in time, Victorian bathhouses weren't just about cleanliness. They were battlegrounds in the war on flesh. And you were one of the brave. The next stop on your odd little journey is a quiet dressing chamber on the top floor of a Mayfair townhouse. It smells of lavender powder and tightly folded desperation. The gas lamps cast long shadows across velvet curtains and polished oak, a luxurious setting for what's about to happen to your torso. A lady's maid stands ready beside a mannequin wearing something terrifying. A corset so narrow it could double as a chimney flue. The satin is beautiful, deep plum with whalebone channels running like prison bars, but the effect, sinister. "Shall we begin?" she asks, not unkindly. You step forward, arms raised like a condemned dancer, and the ritual begins. First, a chemise, then a modest petticoat, then the corset, heavy, stiff, and smelling faintly of starch and talc. The maid starts lacing slowly at first, tugging the cords with practiced rhythm, then faster, tighter. The mirror shows your waist vanishing inch by inch, like a tide going out. Your breath shortens, your ribs protest. Your heart begins to gallop in a way that feels vaguely illegal. This, dear friend, is not just fashion. It is weaponized restraint. While corsets had long been part of Victorian attire, tight lacing, the extreme version, was a different beast. Women began to wear these not just for social events, but as daily weight control tools. The logic was brutal and simple. If your stomach has no space, you can't eat. If you can't eat, you lose weight. If you lose weight, society might, just might, leave you alone. But there's more. Some corsets came with built-in steel bars across the abdomen so you could physically feel the punishment of even trying to expand your belly. Others had pressure plates that could be adjusted like torture devices, designed to discourage meals larger than a biscuit. You're now fully laced. The maid slips a gown over your head, and you realise something horrifying. The dress won't even zip unless the corset is at full constriction. Clothing, in this era, is a lock, and your body is the key that's always too wide. You sit down carefully because slumping is impossible. Your spine is a rod. Breathing is shallow, and yet, in the mirror, you look perfect. A waist that could pass through a hoop, shoulders held back, chin lifted. You look like someone who has never eaten a whole potato, and now comes lunch. You're escorted to a quiet room with chilled water, thin cucumber slices, and 2 crackers the size of postage stamps. No one comments. No one chews loudly. Everyone is equally immobilized by their own corsets. Someone whispers that Lady Branscombe once fainted into her soup after attempting a 3rd spoonful. It is considered an achievement. You try 1 cracker, chew, swallow. You feel it descend like a stone through a straw. The second, you fold it quietly in a napkin and slide it into your sleeve. Because this isn't just lunch, it's a performance, and eating too much, or even too visibly, is a sign of weakness. The corset doesn't just squeeze your stomach, it squeezes your choices, your voice, even your laugh. You can't throw your head back and giggle freely in this thing. The body is bound, and so is your expression of joy, and yet many women swore by it, claimed it gave them elegance, posture, control, a sense of refinement that hunger only sharpened. You stand up, dizzy, your ribs ache, but someone compliments your waistline and suddenly it feels worth it. You make it through the rest of the day by holding onto furniture and sipping ice water through a straw. Walking feels like balancing a tray of glassware on your ribs. Every breath is a compromise between vanity and oxygen. But by evening, you understand why so many Victorian women became obsessed with tight lacing, because it hurts in all the right places. Pain, after all, was proof of effort. In your rented bedchamber, a dressing mirror waits, illuminated by the soft glow of a gas lamp. You disrobe with help from the maid, and when the corset finally comes off, your body doesn't rebound like a spring. It sags, slowly, tenderly. Your ribs expand with a painful shudder, like lungs that forgot how to behave. You inhale deeply for the first time in 12 hours and nearly pass out from the rush. There, just above your hips, are deep red indentations like the signature of an unforgiving lover. And above that, the reward. A waist small enough to wrap both hands around. Victorian society called it the wasp waist, a shape so coveted that advertisements featured silhouettes resembling hourglasses tipped on their sides. It wasn't just for fashion. Some women wore reducing corsets to bed, tightening them gradually each week to shrink their waists over months. These weren't mere garments. They were instruments of transformation, worn not for beauty but for self-denial. And if that meant fainting at the opera, so be it. A collapsed lady was a delicate lady. Her fragility became a virtue. Still, there were critics. Some doctors warned about liver displacement, collapsed lungs, and a condition ominously referred to as corset hysteria. But the warnings were easy to dismiss when society itself enforced the ideal. Even Queen Victoria's daughters were rumoured to wear corsets from childhood, an imperial inheritance of compression and conformity. And here's something strange you learn after a week. The hunger dulls. The corset becomes your second skin. You walk taller, speak less. You begin to enjoy the light-headedness, the floaty elegance it brings. Meals become social rituals rather than nourishment. A single strawberry feels decadent. A boiled egg is a banquet, but it also comes with other less advertised effects. You stop laughing loudly. Bending down is a logistical nightmare. Your lungs can't fill enough for singing, and sneezing feels like a mortal sin. You avoid steps. You avoid dancing. You avoid the temptation to eat more than a nibble because the corset will remind you, sharply, who's in control. And yet, for all its cruelty, the corset gave women something paradoxical. Power through restraint. A weapon in the war of appearances. A shield against judgment. A tool of belonging in a world that measured value in inches, not thoughts. One afternoon, you see a younger girl watching you from across the street. Her dress is loose, her arms full of bread. But her eyes, they lock onto your waist with a kind of awe. And suddenly you realise the corset isn't just clothing, it's a message. You straighten your back, pull your shawl tighter, and walk on, even if every step hurts. Because here in the Victorian world, pain is elegance, and hunger is a virtue. By now you've heard whispers. Behind silk fans and velvet curtains, women trade secrets not found in any etiquette manual. It happens in powder rooms, in corners of apothecaries, even in the back rows of poetry readings. A new solution, they say. One that requires no corset, no diet, no sweat. Just one small pill, and you'll shed pounds like a snake sheds skin. You're sceptical, of course, but curiosity is stronger than caution. So when a friend slips you the name of a certain specialist just off Fleet Street, you tuck it in your glove and head there in the morning mist. The apothecary is tucked between a butcher and a bookbinder, with a faded sign and darkened windows. Inside, it smells of camphor, dried herbs and something sharp, like bleach and rotting apples. Shelves brim with glass jars labelled in Latin and English. Wormwood, belladonna, senna, mercury powder. You pause. Mercury. A tall man with parchment skin and yellow gloves appears from behind a curtain. "You've come for the slimming remedy," he says flatly, not asking. You nod, unsure if your heart or your pride brought you here. He presents a small tin. No label. Just a single instruction. One capsule on an empty stomach with water. "No more than one a week," he murmurs. "Any more and, well, the effects are permanent." You hand over the money, far too much, and leave quickly, clutching the tin like contraband. Back home, in your dim-lit room, you open it. Inside, 6 white capsules, odourless, innocent-looking. You hesitate, then swallow one, and wait. At first, nothing. Then, a subtle warmth in your belly, a slight pressure, a fluttering in your gut like a trapped insect. You try to sit still, but your limbs twitch. You sweat, lightly. A new heat blooms behind your eyes. It's not pain exactly, more like a fever that hasn't introduced itself yet. By evening, your appetite is gone. Food feels foreign. Even the smell of bread makes your stomach lurch. You lie in bed, dizzy, but strangely proud. Is this it? Is this the secret? The next morning, you weigh yourself. 2 pounds lighter. You could scream with relief if your throat wasn't so dry. What you don't know, not yet anyway, is that some of these pills contain Diphyllobothrium latum larvae, a tapeworm, a living organism that sets up shop inside your intestines, consuming whatever you eat before your body can absorb it. In theory, it's brilliant. In practice, a nightmare with teeth. You remember the friend who recommended the pill. She's thinner, yes, but also paler. Her eyes twitch now. She carries a peppermint sachet everywhere because of the smell. She never eats in public. She's always cold. And worst of all, she doesn't talk about it anymore. The woman at your tea circle who lost 30 pounds in 2 months. She disappeared to the countryside last week. Nerves, they say. You wonder what else disappeared with her. But here's the terrifying truth. Some women took these pills willingly, again and again. Because thinness wasn't just desirable, it was survival, it was marriage, it was access, it was worth any risk. And though the tin is nearly empty, you keep it hidden in your drawer, just in case. Because even knowing what you know now, you're still not sure you'd say no again. The days that follow are strangely quiet. Too quiet. Your hunger stays gone, like it packed its bags and left without a note. At first, it feels like a miracle. You glide through meals with nothing more than tea, nodding politely while pastry towers go untouched. People stare, then smile in that knowing way. You're doing it right, they think. But your body has its own voice. It starts as a hollow flutter beneath your rib cage, like someone tapping from the inside. Then comes the exhaustion, the kind that doesn't go away after sleep, only deepens. Your skin pales no matter how much rouge you apply. Your dreams grow strange. Images of white ribbons winding through corridors, swallowing furniture, climbing walls. You wake with a sour taste in your mouth and a belly that feels bloated and empty at the same time. One afternoon, during tea, your hand begins to tremble so badly you nearly spill your cup. A friend across from you, one you hadn't seen in weeks, leans closer and whispers, "Not a question, not really." You took the pills too, didn't you? Her sleeves hide wrists thin as broom handles. Her breath smells sweet and wrong. You both pretend you're talking about hats. The truth seeps out anyway, the way secrets always do. It turns out this isn't new. In fashionable circles across Europe and America, so-called slimming capsules have quietly passed from hand to hand for years. Some contain herbal laxatives, others mystery powders imported from abroad, and some, the worst kind, carry living stowaways. Doctors begin to notice patterns: sudden weight loss followed by strange pains, anemia, weakness. A few brave newspapers even print warnings, burying them between society gossip and sailing schedules. Still, the pills sell. You hear of a woman in Boston who supposedly lost 50 pounds without lifting a finger. You also hear she later insisted something was moving inside her. Another in Paris reportedly expelled yards of ribbon after fainting in an opera house. No one prints the details. Polite society prefers vagueness. And then there's the workaround. Someone invents a device, part funnel, part insult, rumoured to remove the problem at home. It is not effective. Mostly it just frightens. One fashionable salon host claims she tried it and hasn't slept on her back since. No one asks follow-up questions. Eventually a physician confronts you gently. He doesn't scold. He sighs instead. The sigh of someone who has seen too much and been listened to too little. He explains that you're being fed upon, quietly, constantly. He describes calcium losses, vitamin starvation, weakness creeping into the bones themselves. He talks about how creatures like these can live for years, even decades, inside a host who feels fine, right up until they don't. You go home and stare at the tin. Only one capsule left. You'd think you'd feel fear, anger, some grand revelation, but you don't. What you feel is doubt, not about the danger, but about whether thinness is worth surrendering your insides. Is a terrible question to have. You flush the final pill down the sink and sit on the floor and cry. Not because you're ill, but because for the first time you realise how easily you said yes to something that was eating you alive, as long as it left your way smaller. A week later, your appetite returns. Timid, uncertain, like a wounded animal. You let it back in anyway. Some women didn't. You hear years later that governments began cracking down on these pills, finally labelling what they contained. You also hear that someone, somewhere, will always sell something sharper under a softer name, and someone else will always buy it. But tonight, for once, you eat a real dinner, and it tastes like mercy. You're seated in a drawing room that smells faintly of mildew and regret. Across from you, a pale young woman in mourning lace lifts a dainty glass of clear liquid to her lips. She doesn't wince, doesn't blink, just sips and swallows like it's spring water, not what it actually is. Vinegar. 2 tablespoons before every meal, she says, her voice airy like someone narrating a ghost story. It dulls the appetite, keeps the blood sharp. Lord Byron did it, you know. And that's all the explanation you get, because this, apparently, is a method with pedigree. You try it, just a sip, the vinegar hits your teeth like acid rain. Then it drips down your throat with the warmth of a curse. Your stomach clenches instantly, like it's rejecting the entire concept of food, air, and trust. You cough into a handkerchief and the woman smiles, mistaking your convulsion for enthusiasm. This is no isolated ritual. In the mid-1800s, vinegar fasting spread like perfume through upper-class society. Inspired by romantic poets, especially Byron, with his famously haunted cheekbones and visible ribs, women began cleansing themselves with cider vinegar and lemon water. It was said to cut fat, purify blood, and sharpen the mind. What it really did was ruin stomach linings and strip tooth enamel like paint thinner. But the effects were immediate, or seemed to be. A sip of vinegar before meals took away your desire to eat. Combined with a social expectation to nibble like a sparrow, it became a self-reinforcing loop of shrinking portions and shrinking waists. And if you felt faint afterward, all the better. That was elegance, darling. Some women took it further. Vinegar-soaked bread, vinegar tonics with cayenne pepper, even vinegar baths, standing in cold water laced with acetic acid in the belief that it would draw toxins through the skin. The toxins in question were usually not defined. You visit a beauty clinic in Bloomsbury where this practice is formalised. Here, nurses in stiff white aprons administer vinegar compress therapy. You lie back while gauze soaked in sharp-smelling fluid is wrapped around your arms and thighs. It stings, then it burns. One woman next to you whispers through clenched teeth that it makes the fat cells shrink from shock. You want to believe her, but your skin is blotchy and raw by the time the wraps come off. Later that evening you try the vinegar water again, half a cup on an empty stomach. This time your body revolts. The cramps come first, not violent but firm, as if your insides are being scalded. You lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, trying to remember if Byron ever mentioned this part. Somewhere in the flat above, someone coughs for a full minute. The gaslight hisses softly, and beneath your ribs a kind of emptiness sets in. Not just hunger, but hollow. You don't sleep. The burning in your belly lingers, soft but insistent, like a warning you can't read. And in the morning, you weigh slightly less, only slightly, but it feels like proof. You write it down in a little leather journal with shaking hands. Vinegar, effective. Try larger dose, because the pain doesn't matter when the mirror finally begins to change. By the end of the week, vinegar is part of your bloodstream, or so it feels. You keep a small bottle in your handbag next to your gloves and smelling salts. The mere scent of food makes your stomach turn now, but you don't mind. That, apparently, is the point. One morning you visit a friend who's gone even deeper into the ritual. She greets you at the door with a pale face, wet hair, and red patches on her arms. "I took the full vinegar bath," she whispers, almost proud. 15 minutes. Felt like my skin was boiling off. You nod politely, though horrified. Her eyes dart back and forth like she hasn't slept in days. Her waist is visibly smaller, but her voice trembles. She laughs a little too loudly when nothing's funny. At tea, no one eats. Plates of shortbread remain untouched. Instead, each guest is offered a teacup of warm water with apple cider vinegar. A civilized purge, they call it. One woman jokes that she keeps her vinegar bottle beside her Bible. One for the soul, one for the shape, she winks. The others giggle. You do too. But your throat is raw, and your tongue feels furry. A doctor is invited to speak that day. A thin man with long fingers and a distrustful moustache. He tells a half-hearted cautionary tale about a patient who corroded her stomach lining with too much acidity. She lost weight, yes, he says, but also the ability to digest anything but broth for the rest of her life. No one listens. The hostess pours more vinegar water and calls him dramatic. You excuse yourself early, your chest tight, your teeth aching in their sockets. In the mirror you notice small grey shadows near your gum line. The enamel is going. You try not to care, because the waistline is, after all, smaller. By now you've adopted a regimen: vinegar before breakfast, lemon vinegar before tea, and a sip of plain malt vinegar before bed. Your sleep is shallow, interrupted by strange dreams, of rust, of water, of dripping clocks, and your mood, uneven. Sometimes you laugh too hard, other times you cry for no reason. Your bones ache more in the cold. You begin to favour soft scarves and high collars, not because they're fashionable, but because you're shrinking, and the cold seems to find you faster. At a gathering one night, someone brings up Lord Byron again. How he once fasted for days, drank vinegar, and wrapped himself in layers to sweat off the sin of dinner. He was divine, someone sighs. But you wonder, was he divine, or just terribly, terribly empty? Later that evening, you find yourself in a quiet moment alone, clutching your vinegar flask like a relic. You sniff it. You almost sip. Then something, maybe a voice, maybe just your own weary stomach, tells you no. Just for one night you skip the dose. You wake up with a clearer head, a calmer stomach. The world doesn't end. Your waist hasn't ballooned, and you feel, for a few moments, human again. It doesn't last, but the memory does. And one day, years from now, you'll remember the taste of vinegar not as salvation, but as something bitter you finally learn to leave behind. The salon is quiet, as if holding its breath. You're seated on a velvet fainting couch, gazing at a collection of glass vials lined up neatly on a mirrored tray. The labels are ornate, handwritten in gold ink: Lucent Elixir, Essence of Harmony, the subtle slimmer. Beneath the beauty of it all, something prickles at the base of your neck, a hesitation your hostess doesn't share. She pours you a small crystal thimble of the Lucent Elixir and smiles. One sip is all it takes. You'll feel lighter in an hour. You've heard whispers about these tonics, the latest fashion in medicated weight control, sold by reform pharmacists who promise botanical miracles and nervous system realignment. They appear in glossy magazine ads with illustrations of dancing silhouettes and satisfied socialites. But they're not regulated. Not really. The ingredients are proprietary. You aren't supposed to ask. You raise the glass. The scent is floral at first. Lavender, perhaps. But beneath that lies something metallic. It clings to your tongue, thick and strange, like someone melted perfume and stirred it with a nail. You swallow. For a while, nothing happens. Then, slowly, your hands begin to tingle. A sensation like pins and needles spreads up your arms. Your head feels lighter, as though the ceiling just inched away. You laugh, not because anything is funny, but because it's suddenly hard not to. The hostess beams. It's working. These tonics were part of a broader trend in late Victorian society. Over-the-counter slimming elixirs, often laced with stimulants, caffeine, cocaine, strychnine, or worse, sold under poetic names. They promised beauty through chemistry, slimness without sweat, clarity without calories. But the cost? That came later. By the time you leave the salon, your heart is skipping like a child in spring. You feel invincible, ravenous and empty all at once. The wind feels too loud. The pavement shifts under your boots. You blink and colours seem too bright. You do not eat dinner. You cannot. You write letters that make no sense. You rearrange your bedroom furniture at midnight. You laugh to yourself. You weep over the sound of a clock ticking. You don't sleep at all. And in the morning, your waist is tighter, your skin paler, your mind louder. You return for another dose. The second is stronger, or perhaps your body is weaker. You begin to rely on the elixir not just for weight loss, but for movement, for conversation, for presence. Without it, you feel foggy, sluggish, monstrous. With it, you are radiant, unstoppable, glowing with an energy that isn't yours. Your friend, the hostess, starts keeping a locked cabinet. Another guest slurs through breakfast and says she hasn't eaten in 4 days but feels like a cloud. Someone else trembles so violently she spills her teacup. No one says a word, because results are sacred and side effects are rumours. By the third visit, the salon feels less like a sanctuary and more like a chapel. Everyone whispers. Everyone waits their turn like penitents at confession. The mirrored walls reflect a room full of women glowing too brightly. Too thin, too alert, too hollow behind the eyes. You sit in your usual place. The crystal glass is already filled. No one asks if you're well, because in here, wellness is measured in inches, not pulse. The tonic goes down easier now. The taste has shifted from floral to sharp, like licking the edge of a rose thorn. Within minutes, the familiar shimmer spreads through your limbs. The world leans closer. Thoughts become music. You could rearrange kingdoms before breakfast, except something isn't right. The shaking doesn't stop this time. Your hands flutter like trapped birds. Your heart isn't dancing anymore. It's thudding, hard, angry. You press your palm to your chest and feel the rhythm stutter, then sprint. The room tilts. The hostess leans in. You mustn't take it on an empty stomach. You want to laugh. You want to say something witty about empty stomachs being the point. But the words get stuck between your lungs. A woman across from you drops a teacup. It shatters. No one moves. Another stands abruptly, sways, and sits again, pale as wax. You think she's rehearsed the movement. No sudden gestures, no admissions. This place doesn't tolerate weakness. When you finally make it home, your legs give out halfway up the stairs. You collapse onto the carpet and stay there, cheek pressed to wool, listening to your heart argue with itself. You don't return the next day, or the day after. The elixir's aftershocks linger. Nights stretch long. You sweat through silk sheets and wake gasping, your fingers numb. Once you swear you hear whispers in the walls. Another night, your dreams come like storms. Bright, violent, unforgettable. You begin to understand something that no advertisement ever mentioned. This tonic doesn't just take your weight, it takes your quiet. And then the news breaks. A short notice in the society column, discreet as a funeral fan. Miss L collapsed during her afternoon walk. A condition of the heart, they say. Someone else disappears to the seaside for nervous exhaustion. The salon closes abruptly. The cabinet empties. The hostess sells the townhouse and vanishes to Bath. Years later, Parliament begins murmuring about dangerous patent medicines. Chemists finally face regulations. Bottles like yours are pulled from shelves. Labels change. Ingredients are inspected, or hidden better. But here and now, you have a single bottle left. You do not open it. Not because you're brave, but because you are tired. And you finally understand that thinness should never sound like your heart trying to escape your chest. You pour the rest of the elixir down the sink. The liquid glows faintly as it swirls away. Or maybe that's the gaslight playing tricks. Again, you rinse the bottle, set it on the windowsill and let morning creep into the room. You're still alive. And this time, that feels like enough. You think you've escaped the worst of it. Steam chambers, corsets, pills, poisons in pretty bottles. Surely the empire of thinness has exhausted its weapons by now, but it hasn't. One chilly Sunday morning, you're invited to something called the League for Restraint and Renewal. The invitation is printed on cream cardstock bordered in violets and smells faintly of incense. It promises clarity of body and moral lightness. You almost laugh when you read it, until you realise 3 women you know have already joined. The meeting takes place not in a church, but in a rented lecture hall behind a hat shop. The kind of space used for spiritualism one week, and temperance talks the next. Rows of folding chairs face a raised platform where a banner hangs in solemn lettering. Fasting is freedom. You take a seat near the back. The room fills quickly. Wives of merchants, retired actresses, a seamstress who looks like she hasn't eaten a full meal in several winters. Everyone clutches a little booklet titled The Discipline of Denial. On the cover, a woman floats upward, lighter than air, releasing a loaf of bread like it's a sinful child. Then the speaker arrives. She is tall, severe, and dressed in dove grey from collar to cuff. Her voice isn't loud, but it is sharp. It cuts the murmurs in the room like a knife through cake. Fat, she says, is disobedience. The word lands heavy. She speaks for an hour, and it feels longer, about strength through hunger, virtue through emptiness. She quotes philosophers, half-remembered medical theories, and something that sounds suspiciously like scripture, though no book is ever named. Food, she insists, clouds the spirit. Flesh weighs the soul. The path to grace is narrow, and most wastes are too wide. The audience nods. Some weep. You sit frozen. This is not health. This is discipline dressed as deliverance. After the lecture, pamphlets are distributed. Fasting calendars. Tapes, not for wrists but for mouths, to discourage night indulgence. Yes, actual fabric bands meant to keep your jaw shut while sleeping. No one laughs. Several women buy too. This, it turns out, is not rare. All across Britain, organisations like this are popping up. Some religious, some philosophical, some merely theatrical, all promising virtue through self-starvation. Public weigh-ins are encouraged. Confessions are shared. The thinner you grow, the more applause you receive. A woman in the front row is celebrated for surviving 3 days on lemon water and prayer. You're offered a pledge card. 1 week fasts, 2 week fasts. As long as God grants. You decline, quietly, but feel suddenly loud in your refusal. The woman beside you narrows her eyes. On the way out, you overhear someone whisper, "I passed out yesterday. It felt like enlightenment." You want to shake her. Instead, you walk into the fog with your head buzzing and your stomach, for once, growling in protest. Later that evening, you open your journal and realise something chilling. Every method until now attacked the body. This one attacks the mind, and it's winning. The next meeting is standing room only. You don't go, but you hear about it anyway. The league is growing. That's the word. Expanding, like something alive. Their booklets appear in tea rooms. Their pamphlets slip into handbags. At one dinner party, you spot the phrase, "Fasting is freedom," embroidered onto a handkerchief as though it were a family motto. It doesn't matter whether you believe anymore. The city believes for you. A friend stops calling you for luncheons. Another gently suggests you look heavy around the eyes. A third asks if you're still eating things with substance, in a tone people reserve for confessing crimes. And then you hear about the weigh-ins. They've started holding them at the end of meetings. Not mandatory, of course. Nothing is mandatory. Nothing except the quiet judgment that folds itself into the room when you refuse. One woman is applauded for losing 8 pounds in a fortnight. Another is scolded with silence for gaining one. Silence, you discover, can bruise. One evening, you follow the sound of singing and find yourself outside the lecture hall again. The windows glow with lamplight. Inside, shadows sway like figures underwater. You stand there, listening, as a chorus rises. Not a hymn, not a prayer, a chant. You can't hear the words clearly, but you don't need to. The meaning seeps through the brick. Smaller is purer, empty is clean, hunger is holiness. You step away. At home, the mirror becomes an enemy. The scale, a tyrant. You pull on your corset tighter than usual, just to punish yourself for the thought of toast. You catch your reflection and barely recognize the eyes staring back. They aren't yours anymore. They belong to someone who's afraid of bread. It's astonishing how quickly an idea becomes a rule. A former member, one of the first you learn, sends you a letter. She's been dismissed quietly for lack of discipline. Her handwriting shakes. She describes days without food and nights with fever. She writes of lies told to herself and others, of fainting in silence because fainting too loudly brings shame. And then, one line in careful script. I stopped being hungry because I stopped being alive in myself. You fold the letter and press it to your chest. Finally, the newspapers catch on. Not the society pages, the back columns. A short article about a woman found collapsed after a 3-week fast. Another entry, weeks later, about a girl no older than 19 who joined for guidance. The League denies everything, blames weakness, blames lack of devotion. Your friend who once swore by them no longer whispers about virtue. She moves slowly now. Her hands are always cold. She forgets things, names, trains, days of the week. She confesses to you, one rainy afternoon, I don't remember what joy feels like without counting it against my body. You hold her hand. It feels like bone in paper. Eventually, as these things always do, the League fractures, internal arguments, splinter groups. The louder the doctrine becomes, the harder it is to hear the human underneath. One night you tear up the invitation card you never used and drop the pieces into the coal hearth. They burn softly, like old lies do. And in the quiet after, with your stomach warm again and your windows fogged just a little from soup, you realise the most dangerous diets were never the ones in bottles. They were the ones that told you to disappear. After months of rigid rituals and whispered rules, you're ready for something different. Not gentler, just stranger. That's how you end up here, inside the marble foyer of a fashionable townhouse turned private gymnasium. The walls are lined with gilt-framed prints of Greco-Roman athletes. A statue of Apollo, tastefully draped, watches over the room with blank detachment. You're greeted by a young man in a starched collar and a look of forced cheer. "Welcome to the modern physique revival," he says, handing you a silk robe and pointing toward the chamber at the end of the hall. "You'll feel renewed in under an hour." You nod, unsure what you've agreed to. Inside, it's not what you expect. No dumbbells, no tracks. Instead, the room is filled with machines. Brass, leather, belts, rollers, springs. They look less like instruments of fitness and more like something a dentist and a blacksmith might build in a fever dream. This is the new frontier in slimming. Passive exercise. You don't run. You don't lift. You simply submit. The first contraption resembles a narrow table with a strap across the midsection. You lie down, and it begins to vibrate violently, rattling your teeth while your hips bounce in place. Stimulates the liver and breaks up belly fat, the attendant explains, as though this were gospel. 10 minutes is equivalent to walking a mile. The next station involves a large spinning drum covered in soft wooden knobs. You press your thighs against it while it rotates rapidly, kneading your flesh like a lump of bread dough. You grip the handles and try not to scream. The woman beside you hums softly through gritted teeth. Somewhere behind a velvet curtain, another machine clatters like an angry sewing cabinet. You glance over and see a pair of legs sticking out, trembling. The machine is punching her back with padded fists over and over while she reads a magazine. This is for lymphatic drainage, your guide says, also quite relaxing. You wonder if the woman has gone into shock. Then it's your turn. You're strapped into something that looks like a saddle, but less friendly. 2 padded rollers squeeze your waist and begin to spin in opposite directions. It feels like being wrung out by polite machinery. A bell dings when your time is up. You try to stand, but your knees wobble like pudding. One woman, flushed and euphoric, grabs your arm and whispers, "Isn't it marvellous? I lost 3 inches in a fortnight. Haven't lifted a finger." You nod, though your fingers are currently numb. This, you learn, is all the rage now. In Paris, in Vienna, even in Chicago. The home versions are worse, cranked by hand or powered by foot treadles, some designed to vibrate you into thinness while you knit. Catalogues advertise them as lady-friendly alternatives to vulgar sweating. A revolution in refinement. Doctors are sceptical. Some say it might help with circulation, briefly, but most agree it's more likely to bruise your kidneys than banish your belly. But that doesn't matter. These machines offer something subtler than science. They offer the illusion of control. You dress again, skin aching, temples pounding. As you step outside into the street, the sound of gears and belts fades behind you. For a moment, you think you can still feel the vibration in your spine. It's not pain exactly, but it's not renewal either. The soreness lingers, a strange, invisible ache that moves around your body as if it's trying to find the exit. You don't bruise, not visibly, but your muscles twitch at night, and your sleep is shallow. Still, when you look in the mirror, your waist appears smoother. Or maybe you just stand taller now, having spent an hour being compressed and churned like dough. You return the following week. This time, they recognize you. "Back so soon," the attendant smiles. He adjusts the roller pressure without asking. The clientele is expanding. Pun unintended. There's now a waiting room, a tea service, and polite conversation about targeted sculpting. A woman claims she no longer needs a corset. "The machine has trained my figure to remember," she says, tapping her ribs with a gloved hand. "You're assigned a new machine. It looks like a harness attached to pulleys. You step into it, and it lifts you an inch off the floor, then begins a slow swaying motion. This stimulates internal balance, they say. It feels like being cradled by a drunk marionette. While you float, the woman beside you steps onto a belt-driven treadmill that doesn't move her forward. It just shakes. Her cheeks jiggle with every rotation. Her eyes are closed. "I pretend I'm galloping across the moors," she whispers. You begin to notice how no one talks about food here. Not hunger, not meals, only inches, measurements, apparatuses. The machines have replaced the table as the place where the body's negotiated. Later, over tea, someone mentions a woman in Birmingham who tried to combine 3 machines at once and passed out during her treatment. "She came to looking positively luminous," they say admiringly. And then there are rumours, quieter ones. A woman with bruised ribs, another with a dislocated hip. Someone supposedly had a seizure on the vibrational saddle. But no one dwells on these things. They laugh them off as exaggeration or user error. "She must have slouched," one woman says of the hip. You begin to worry you're not using the machines properly, so you follow every instruction, you tighten every strap, you hold your breath when told, and you endure, because you're not here for comfort, you're here for results. After your 5th session, the head attendant hands you a slip of paper, a monthly progress chart. Your waist has shrunk half an inch, your thighs a quarter. You stare at the numbers like they're sacred. And that night, as you undress, you run your hands over your body and wonder if you're sculpting yourself into something or away from something. The truth is, these machines didn't invent the pressure. They just gave it a rhythm, a sound, a switch you can flip to say, I'm trying, I'm participating, I'm obeying. That's the real appeal. Not weight loss, but worthiness. You go to sleep with the phantom buzz of machinery still humming in your joints, and in your dreams the belts keep turning. You're invited to a dinner party in Bloomsbury, the kind that promises intellectual banter, miniature pastries, and at least one composer who won't eat anything after sunset. You dress carefully, choosing the gown with the looser bodice. It doesn't matter. You won't be eating much tonight anyway. Not because of the corset, not this time. Because of the rules. Tonight's host is a devotee of the newest fashion sweeping certain elite circles. Fletcherism. You've heard whispers, read a few pamphlets, but nothing quite prepares you for the sound of 16 dinner guests all chewing in unison. Slowly, rhythmically, quietly counting under their breath. 1, 2, 3, 32, 50, 75, 100. You take your seat next to a woman with a thin veil and a sharper chin. She smiles without opening her lips and points at your bread roll. Chew each bite until it disappears, liquefies in the mouth. Only then may you swallow, if at all. You laugh nervously. She doesn't. The soup arrives. You raise your spoon, but everyone else simply lifts the bowl to their lips and sips, savouring like monks with teacups. Conversation is limited. Too much jaw movement required. You manage a bite of carrot. It tastes fine, once. But you chew it 45 times, and it turns into a kind of vegetal paste that clings to your molars. By chew 70, your jaw aches. By chew 90, you've lost the will to swallow. Someone across the table is dabbing tears from her eyes. Onion, perhaps, or just the spiritual intensity of mastication. This is the chewing cult, formerly known as Fletcherism, named after Horace Fletcher, a well-fed American who declared that most disease, sadness, and social failure came from improper chewing. His followers were to chew every bite, bread, meat, water even, until it dissolved completely. Swallowing prematurely was discouraged. Swallowing anything that hadn't earned its right was impolite. You glance around. No one has eaten more than 2 spoonfuls of anything, and it's already been an hour. The host smiles serenely, cheeks puffed with partially chewed lentils. It's not about eating less, he says. It's about eating right. He hasn't swallowed a single thing. You nod, too tired to argue. Dessert arrives. Something that was once cake. You chew it until it turns into glue. Someone asks if you feel the vibrational alignment yet. You mumble that you feel a headache. Another guest suggests chewing to music. A waltz keeps the rhythm gentle, she whispers. Someone else hums softly between bites, and a strange harmony builds around the table. Choo-choo hum choo-choo sigh. You feel like you've joined a choir of disordered digestion. And still, no one is full. No one is satisfied. That's the point. Fletcherism claims to reduce appetite by prolonging consumption, turning meals into hours-long rituals. But what it really reduces is joy, the spontaneity of hunger, the comfort of soup, the ecstasy of a stolen biscuit. You begin to understand that this isn't about food at all. It's about control. You excuse yourself to the powder room. Your jaw throbs. Your cheeks feel tight. You stare into the mirror and wonder, how many chews will it take before you disappear? You escape the dinner party with your jaw on strike and your stomach deeply confused. On the walk home, you pass a bakery and the smell of fresh bread nearly brings you to your knees. You don't chew the air. You don't whisper a number. You simply breathe like someone waking from a strange dream. By morning, Fletcherism follows you out of Bloomsbury and into the paper. Advertisements promise slim figures, calm nerves, and the end of indigestion forever. Testimonials bloom like mildew. A baronet swears his gout vanished after he chewed a steak for 20 minutes. A woman claims her melancholy melted when she counted her peas. The idea spreads because it feels so doable. No equipment, no sweat, just willpower and jaw muscles. And so by lunchtime you find yourself trying it again. One bite of apple becomes a séance. You chew slowly, determined. 10, 20, 30. By 40 the sweetness vanishes. By 60 your mouth is full of ghosts. You swallow something that used to be fruit and stare at your plate, suddenly repelled by colour, texture, and the thought of doing it all again. You notice how naturally the method encourages less eating. No one forbids you from finishing your meal. It just becomes so unpleasant that finishing feels like defeat. Hunger shrinks quietly, like a frightened thing beneath floorboards. It's clever, vicious, polite. The papers begin hosting debates. Doctors argue that chewing thoroughly may indeed aid digestion, which is true, but they stop short of recommending you ruminate like a cow. Still, Fletcher himself grows famous. He gives lectures in silk waistcoats and smiles as if he's discovered the cure for gravity. It becomes known that he once demonstrated his strength by defeating trained athletes while living on a diet you could fit into a hatbox. This, apparently, is proof. You try a group demonstration one afternoon in a rented hall. Everyone brought lunch. No one eats. They chew. They pause. They count. Occasionally someone loses track and starts again from 1. The mood is reverent. A man near you closes his eyes while working on a single grape. A woman looks skyward at Chew 87 like she expects applause from above. You stomach a sliver of cheese with such patience that time becomes theoretical. Afterward, people compare jaw soreness the way some compare tans. That evening you give up. You eat soup, with a spoon, like a rebel, like a human being. It feels like mercy again. But Fletcherism has its teeth in society now. Schools experiment with it. Health columns praise it. Women whisper about it in parks like it's a love affair. And you can't help noticing the pattern by now. If a method makes you disappear politely, it becomes fashion. A few weeks later, you hear of a young man who tried to chew water and forgot to breathe. The story is told quietly and with embarrassment. Another woman's jaw reportedly locked in the middle of a cutlet. Her family blames tension. Everyone pretends coincidence is a cure. You realise then that the danger wasn't in the chewing. It was in the belief that eating should be a burden, something to earn, something to survive, something to suffer through for beauty's sake. That idea is far harder to spit out. You don't join another chewing circle, but you see them everywhere now, in restaurants, in libraries, in carriage seats where lips move in silence while hands cradle crumbs like treasure. The city is chewing itself thinner, and you, for once, refuse to count. It begins with a rumour, as these things often do. A woman whispers to you over the clink of teacups. "There's a man in Spitalfields who can melt the fat off your belly." She taps her waist with one gloved finger. Directly. You raise an eyebrow. "Surgery?" She shakes her head. "Cupping." You pause. "Cupping? Like the old bloodletting kind?" She leans in closer, voice low. "It doesn't draw blood, just heat and fat. He's helped actresses, society ladies, even 2 members of Parliament, though no one says their names aloud. And so, on a fog-choked Wednesday, you find yourself in a narrow lane behind a fishmonger's stall, where the windows are dark and the curtains always drawn. The sign says Traditional Balancing Therapies, a euphemism clearly. Inside it smells of camphor and roasted herbs. The room is dim. You're ushered by a silent woman into a changing partition, asked to disrobe from the waist up, and told to lie on a padded table. The padding is minimal. Enter the practitioner, a small man in wire-rimmed glasses with fingers that move like he's tuning an invisible violin. He lights a small flame, lowers a glass cup over it to suck out the air, then flips it, hot, onto your lower back. The skin pulls instantly into a red dome beneath the cup. You gasp. "Good," he says, gently spinning the cup. "We begin." This is Victorian fire cupping, a leftover from older medicine now rebranded as targeted slimming. The idea is simple and brutal. Apply suction to draw blood to the surface and supposedly fat away from the organs. Some practitioners claim it loosens fat deposits. Others say it awakens lazy flesh. What it really does is leave bruises shaped like moons. 1 cup becomes 4, then 6. They line your sides, your hips, even, scandalously, your abdomen. The heat isn't unbearable, but it feels invasive, like the cups are reading your secrets through your skin. Another woman lies in the curtained space beside you. You hear her breathing, shallow and quick. "I could feel it pulling the fat out last week," she whispers, "right from the ribs." You try to believe her. After 20 minutes, the cups are removed. The sensation is strange. Your skin deflates with a soft pop, like uncorking a bottle. The mirror reveals large, round bruises in deep burgundy. Some even border on violet. The practitioner nods solemnly. Signs of stagnation. Next time, we move higher, under the arms. You pay in cash and walk home slowly, wrapped in a shawl, trying not to think about what's happening beneath the bruises. You ache, but it's the kind of ache that society has taught you to interpret as progress. By the next week, you go again and again. Each time, the cups leave different patterns, as though your body is being marked with a code only others in the know can read. One woman at your salon lifts her sleeve just slightly, revealing a perfect circle fading into yellow. You nod in recognition. A secret club. A constellation of discomfort worn like a badge. But you get thinner? Maybe. Or maybe you just carry yourself differently now, with the posture of someone who endures. You stop questioning whether it works. You've learned by now that in this world the bruises are proof enough. Your bruises fade slowly, like twilight after a long day. First plum, then wine, then yellow, until they vanish completely, leaving skin that feels thinner, even if it isn't. But vanity rarely waits for science. The absence of fat becomes less important than the appearance of effort. You're part of something now, something painful, and that somehow makes it sacred. You hear the method is evolving. There's a new variation called motion cupping. The practitioner slides the heated cups across the flesh instead of letting them sit. It leaves angry red trails like claw marks. One woman swears her waist reduced by 1/2 inch after just one session. She tells this to everyone, holding her tea saucer with a hand wrapped in linen from a burn that she doesn't mention. You try it. Of course you do. This time the heat bites deeper. The sliding cups feel like a dozen mouths pulling your skin in opposite directions. The practitioner hums softly as he moves them, like he's polishing furniture, not sculpting flesh. When it's over, you're dizzy. Your ribs are striped. You can't look in the mirror that night. Not because you're ashamed, but because you're afraid you'll be proud. The next morning your body feels lighter, not in weight, but in resistance, like you've surrendered something invisible. At your next salon visit, you overhear a woman describe how she now applies cupping at home. "I trained my maid," she says. Of course, the girl's hands shake, but practice makes perfect. Another laughs, sharing how her husband mistook her marks for a skin condition and summoned a doctor. "He said it was self-inflicted. I told him so as fashion." The line draws laughter. What no one laughs about are the rumours of infections, of skin tearing under faulty glass, of a woman who collapsed from anemia after her 12th session in a single month. But those are outliers, they say. Weak constitutions, improper technique. The truth is this: cupping isn't new. It's ancient. But its rebranding in Victorian times as a weight loss miracle gave it fresh teeth. It no longer promised healing, only shrinking. Not health, but hollowing. And in a society where silence is preferred, what could be more appealing than a slimming technique that leaves you wordless with pain? You begin spacing your sessions further apart. Your bruises take longer to fade now, and one day you find a faint scar under your left shoulder. You trace it with your fingertip, wondering how many women are walking around with the same quiet tattoo. The cost of belonging. Eventually, as fashion always does, the trend moves on. New tonics arrive, new corset styles, new whispers, but you still remember the sound of suction cups popping from skin, like little mouths releasing their secrets. You still feel the ghost of that grip on your belly, long after the glass has gone cold, and sometimes, though you never say it aloud, you miss it. Because in a world where your body was never really yours, at least the cups left marks you could see. You first hear of it from a dressmaker. She's hemming a walking gown for you, one that's just a touch too snug in the arms, and as she tugs at the seams, she remarks, "If you're serious about trimming down, you might consider a sweating suit." She says it casually, the way one might suggest a new hat pin or lavender foot soak. You blink. A what? She nods toward a folded advertisement pinned to her wall, a pale sketch of a woman wrapped head to toe in gleaming black. The caption reads, "Rubber corsets and slimming suits, shed pounds while sitting still." You recognize the name of the manufacturer. They're reputable, or at least expensive. And so, days later, the parcel arrives. Inside is a full-body rubber garment, stiff and strangely slick. The texture is something between oilskin and candle wax. It smells faintly of coal tar and ambition. It takes you 20 minutes to get into it. There are hooks, clasps, laces, and a corset belt that wraps around the waist with the enthusiasm of a vice. Once you're in, movement becomes deliberate. Each step squeaks faintly. Your limbs resist bending. Your skin is instantly warmer. By the time you walk from your bedroom to the parlour, your back is damp. This is Victorian rubberware, a short-lived fashion miracle that promised to bake the fat away by trapping body heat under layers of impermeable material. Marketed especially toward women too modest or too faint for steam baths or strenuous exercise, it claimed to offer discreet, at-home slimming. You could garden, write letters, or simply lie in bed and sweat your silhouette smaller. You wear it for an hour, and in that hour you become a furnace. Perspiration trickles down your back, behind your knees, across your scalp. Your chemise soaks through. The rubber begins to stick to your skin like glue. The suit doesn't breathe. It doesn't release. It just holds. Every drop, every ache, every doubt. By the time you peel it off, you're drenched. Your stockings are sopping. Your underclothes could be wrung out like kitchen rags. You lie on the floor for several minutes, fanning yourself with a book of poetry and gasping softly. But the next morning, you're down a pound. Or at least, the scale says so. That's all it takes. You wear it again and again. One woman you know wears hers overnight and claims she wakes up with skin like porcelain and a waist like ribbon. Another confesses she started wearing hers under her street clothes. Just for a little added effort, she smiles, while her knees quiver beneath the table. But the risks are real. Fainting spells, rashes, boils. One woman was reportedly found unconscious in her conservatory, rubber suit still sealed like a chrysalis. Her maid couldn't get her out of it and had to cut the seams. The doctor who arrived said only, why not just go for a walk? But walking isn't fashionable. Sweating in silence is, and so you carry on. Because suffering, quietly in rubber, is still better in the eyes of society than eating a full lunch. Because it means you're trying. And in this city, that's all anyone truly expects of a woman. Effort that never smells like effort. By week 3, your skin is raw in places you're too embarrassed to mention. Behind your knees, under your arms, around the corset seams where the rubber digs in with a vengeance no amount of talcum powder can soothe. But you keep wearing it, because they keep noticing. You look sharper, says one friend, eyes on your collarbone. So elegant, says another, touching your sleeve like she can feel the proof through fabric. No one says the word thinner, but that's exactly what they mean. You become part of a secret club, women bound by rubber and silence. At a tea salon, one woman excuses herself not because she's full, but because her suit has made her lightheaded. Another sips only broth and explains she's limiting salt to increase perspiration. I don't want to retain anything, she laughs, dabbing her forehead with a lace kerchief. Then come the innovations. One boutique begins selling rubber gloves lined with mustard powder for slimming the fingers. Another offers rubber stocking garters infused with camphor. Even undergarments arrive with instructions. Wear 6 hours daily to target lower belly. One catalogue proudly proclaims, the modern woman perspires with purpose. You try sleeping in yours. It's a mistake. The night is a humid nightmare of sticking sheets and laboured breathing. At dawn you wake feeling like you've been buried in warm clay. The bedding is soaked, your hair plastered to your face. You peel the suit off inch by inch and lie there trembling, arms outstretched like some poor parboiled saint. But again, the scale is moved, and again, that's enough. Of course, others aren't so lucky. A woman collapses during a carriage ride, her underlayers soaked and her corset rusting at the seams. She'd worn her full-body suit beneath 4 layers of silk, determined to melt while mingling. Another develops a persistent cough that her doctor blames on trapped moisture. Still another begins losing hair in clumps, the result supposedly of chronic overheating and dehydration. But these are cautionary tales, meant for the careless, the weak, the unprepared. You're not like them. You hydrate, you rest, you know your limits, until the day you don't. It happens quietly. You're at home, practicing a pianoforte piece with hands that keep slipping on the keys. Your vision swims, your stomach flips, your breath won't come all the way in. You call for your maid. She helps you peel off the rubber suit, now hot and clammy like old meat. Your skin is blotched red and white, your chemise transparent with sweat. You sit by the window drinking tepid water, wrapped in a cotton robe that feels like forgiveness. You don't put the suit back on that day, or the next. And slowly you notice something else. You're no longer afraid of the pause. You eat a full breakfast, quietly. You go for a walk, unshaped by machinery or rubber. You take a bath that doesn't involve steam or tinctures, and for the first time in months you feel like your body is simply there. Not a project, not a battlefield, not a furnace. You keep the suit folded in a box under your bed, like a relic from a strange pilgrimage. You never wear it again. But for years afterward, every time you sweat naturally from dancing, from laughing, from walking too fast in the summer, a part of you still expects applause. Your next lesson in discomfort arrives not from an apothecary nor a salon, but from a governess. You're visiting your cousin's country home, a grand place with creaking stairs and too many parlours. One morning, while walking in the garden, you stumble upon the governess guiding your young niece through what she calls a posture walk. Arms straight, chin up, back rigid as a fence post. The child groans. The governess frowns. They must learn early, she says, turning to you. A correct bearing suppresses appetite and excess emotion. A slouching girl becomes an indulgent woman. You smile politely and try to walk away, but it's too late. She's already taken your measurements. An hour later, you're standing in a second-floor sewing room being fitted with a posture belt. It's an unassuming device at first glance, a simple strap that crosses your shoulders and another that wraps tightly just below your rib cage. But once secured, it forces you upright with unrelenting precision. No slouching, no bending, no breathing too deeply. Your spine is held like a violin string. It trains the body into elegance, the governess says, tugging one strap tighter, and trains the appetite out of excess. Because here's the hidden truth. These belts were not just for standing straight. They were worn for hours, sometimes all day, to reinforce the posture of restraint. And not just physical restraint, but moral, emotional, even dietary. Slumping, after all, was associated with indulgence. And indulgence in any form was a sin. You wear the belt to lunch. It's nearly impossible to eat. Your stomach, compressed beneath the chest strap, protests at even the suggestion of food. Swallowing feels unnatural. Every breath is shallow. You poke at your salad and drink only tea. When you try to shift in your chair, the strap bites into your side like a scolding. By the end of the meal, you feel faint, but upright. And to the others at the table, that's what matters. Later, back in the sewing room, the governess presents additional options. Chin braces to prevent nodding, hip girdles to teach stillness, even armbands to discourage elbows from flaring while eating. She smiles. Control begins in the limbs. You realise that in this new chapter of slimming, the target is no longer fat or flesh. It's freedom of movement. You write to a friend in London who replies with enthusiasm. Oh yes, I wear mine daily. It's rather comforting, actually, like being reminded who I ought to be. You stare at the letter for a long time. That night you sleep in the belt, not because you want to, but because undoing it feels like defeat. Your dreams are strange. You're a puppet with invisible strings, held in perfect posture while your mouth cannot open. In the morning your back aches, but your waist is straighter, your shoulders higher, and your reflection, at least at first, looks dignified, until you see the red lines across your ribs. The lines don't fade. They become little reminders stitched into your skin, pale bruises and pressure tracks that remain long after the straps are unbuckled. You run a fingertip along them in the mirror, half proud, half unnerved. They're proof, you suppose, of discipline or submission. The difference in Victorian society is often blurred. You continue wearing the posture belt, at first only for meals, then for walks, then for morning letter writing. Eventually it becomes second nature, your body adjusting around its constraints like ivy around a fence. You sit straighter, speak softer, laugh less. You begin to forget how it felt to slouch. Others notice. At a garden gathering, someone remarks on your composed frame. Another says you carry yourself with a dignity of restraint. A man nods approvingly as you enter the room, not because you're smiling, but because you're aligned. You wear praise like a medal, until it starts to chafe. The discomfort grows in secret places, a dull ache beneath your shoulder blades, a catch in your breath when climbing stairs, a stiffness in the neck that makes you turn your whole body instead of your head. Your doctor examines you and frowns. Muscle tension, he says, possibly spinal compression. He recommends rest. You nod, then tighten the strap before leaving his office. Because what's pain compared to posture? One day you try going without the belt. You sit for breakfast and immediately feel loose, disorganized, messy. You imagine your silhouette sagging like melted wax. Every bite of toast feels like rebellion. You finish only half. The belt stares at you from the bureau, coiled like a question you don't want to answer. You give in before lunch. Later, you attend a talk on female decorum and the aesthetics of stillness. The speaker, a rigid woman with eyes like pinpoints, explains that a straight spine reflects a straight soul. That slouching leads to moral laxity, wandering minds and wandering waistlines. She holds up a model of the ideal Victorian spine, narrow, upright, bowed like a harp. You wonder if she sleeps standing up. Afterward, a small girl curtsies to you and whispers, "I want to be as tall as you." You smile, but it's a brittle thing, because you want to say, "I'm not tall. I'm just being held up by something I can't take off." The truth is, the posture belt doesn't just shape your body, it shapes your days. You begin planning your schedule around it, when you can loosen it, when you can't. It determines your meals, your pace of walking, your ability to rest. Even your thoughts bend around it. It is, in its quiet tyranny, the most effective slimming tool yet, because it doesn't just make eating harder, it makes feeling harder. Softness, physical or emotional, becomes an intrusion. You begin to fear relaxation the way others fear gluttony, and when you finally, truly take it off, not for an hour but for good, your body sags into itself like a sigh. It hurts, but it's also relief. You press your palm to your sternum where the strap once crossed and feel your chest rise, freely, awkwardly, fully. It feels human. For the first time in weeks you slouch and you smile. You visit a friend's townhouse on a grey Thursday, expecting idle gossip and lukewarm tea. What you find instead is a breakfast table set with astonishing precision. Porcelain plates, monogrammed napkins, a pyramid of cut fruit so symmetrical it looks sculpted. And beside each plate, a bottle, elegant, labelled in gold, slim glass vials each containing a syrup of unnatural brightness. Cherry red, amber, mint green. They gleam like candy. But the expressions on the women's faces say otherwise. Your hostess waves you to a chair and pours you a cup of weak broth. No bread, no jam, just this, a spoon, a napkin, and the small bottle marked Puritas No. 3. You recognise the brand. Everyone does. It's one of dozens now flooding the market. Victorian patent purgatives, promising instant cleansing, lightness, and graceful inner renewal. Sold over the counter and by mail-order catalogue, they're a household staple now. Some are herbal, others chemical, most are secretive. You uncap the bottle. The smell is sharp, sweet, slightly medicinal, a mix of peppermint and warning. "Take it all in one go," your friend whispers. "Less unpleasant that way." You drink. At first, nothing. Then a warmth in the belly. Then the cramps begin, slowly, politely, like a guest clearing their throat. You excuse yourself and stumble toward the nearest water closet. For the next hour, you're entirely at the mercy of the potion. This, you learn, is part of the process. The women at the table aren't there for breakfast. They're there to purge, together, weekly, sometimes more often. It's become a kind of ritual, elegant in its presentation, brutal in its effect. They don't call it a purge, of course. They call it a reset, a lightening, a clarifying start to the day. The vocabulary is dainty, the outcome is not. When you return, pale and breathless, the women offer you orange slices and knowing smiles. One pats your hand and says, "The first time is always the hardest." You smile back, even as your stomach groans, because to say no now would be to admit you weren't ready. And in this house, readiness is everything. You sit through the rest of the gathering in silence, sipping broth and nibbling on fennel seeds to soothe your gut. Around you, the conversation turns to favourite formulas, dosage tips, and stories of "that one time I forgot to dilute it." Someone recommends Dr. Templar's violet drops. Another swears by Madame Hess's gentle decline elixir, which uses fig extract and a pinch of opium. You nod, you listen, you pretend. But by the time you leave, you feel as though your insides have been wrung out like laundry. Still, your dress fits better. That evening you weigh yourself. You're down 2 pounds, and the bottle in your handbag glows quietly, waiting for next time. The next week, you do it again. This time, you don't wait for an invitation. You purchase your own vial of Puritas No. 3 from a discreet chemist shop tucked between a tobacconist and a print seller. The man behind the counter doesn't ask questions. He wraps the bottle in brown paper and nods as if he's handing you something as ordinary as sewing needles. Back home, you prepare. No breakfast, no milk in your tea. You drink the vial standing over the wash basin, already bracing for what's to come. The warmth starts sooner this time. Your body remembers. The potion works faster, sharper. By mid-morning you've cancelled your appointments and posted a note on the door. Unwell today. Please call again tomorrow. It becomes a habit. Not daily, you're not reckless, but often enough that your body starts adapting. Your appetite shrinks. Your evenings are quieter. Your waistline tightens in half-inch increments, and your dresses no longer protest. Your cheeks hollow ever so slightly. Friends begin to remark on your new glow. They don't ask how you got it. You find new favourites. Madame Noel's French tincture is milder, perfect for garden luncheons. Sister Evelyn's herbal waters leaves a faint lavender aftertaste, masking the bitterness beneath. Some ladies even host purgative parties, where women recline on fainting couches with hot compresses while servants pass around lemon slices and poetry pamphlets. But not all the stories are charming. You hear of a woman who took double doses in secret and collapsed in the middle of a society ball. She was found curled in the dressing room, her gloves stained and her lips cracked. Another accidentally took a veterinary version, meant for horses. She didn't speak for 2 days afterward. The bottle had no warning label, most didn't. Doctors begin to murmur. One writes a public letter, warning that constant purging leads to nutrient loss, fainting, weakened bowels. But no one wants to be seen defending indulgence. Publicly, women say they fast and pray. Privately, they purge and recover in darkened rooms with windows barely open. You try to stop once. You last a week. But the heaviness returns, not in your body, but in your mind. A sense of swelling, of loss of control. Your dresses feel too tight, your face too soft, your appetite too loud, so you give in. 1 dose, then 2 days later, another. You promise yourself you're being moderate. Moderation, after all, is the polite word for dependence. The worst part? You begin to prefer the emptiness, the lightness of skipping dinner, the hollow comfort of an unburdened belly. The ache in your thighs as you climb the stairs becomes a reassurance, a sign that you're doing it right. And all the while, the world applauds. You're complimented in dress shops, invited to more luncheons, told you look delicate, fresh, positively Parisian. Someone compares your silhouette to a Grecian statue, all lines and angles. You smile and murmur thanks, though you can barely keep your head from tilting. One night, after a particularly strong tonic, you dream you're made of glass, clear, sharp, empty. You wake with a taste of fennel and bile on your tongue, and you still reach for the bottle. That morning your scale shows your lowest weight yet, and your body, trembling and parched, doesn't argue. It starts with an envelope edged in gold. Inside, a card thick as a slice of cake and just as sweet with promise, the chloric ball. Dancing, it assures you, will sculpt the form and elevate the spirit. Attendance, naturally, implies dedication, and dedication in this city is a currency more valuable than sugar. The ballroom glows when you arrive, chandeliers dripping light like honey. The musicians tune their strings. The women shimmer in silk so thin it seems spun from hunger itself. There is a perfume in the air, roses, perspiration and ambition. This is the newest beauty creed. Dance it off. No more tinctures or tonics tonight, they promise. No belts, no rubber, just movement, grace, sweat in public, but call it art. You take the floor at the first waltz and the room spins into elegance. Your shoes whisper over the wood. Your partner's glove is cool in your hand. At first, it's bliss, a civilized way to forget yourself. Then the tempo quickens. The second dance blurs into the third. By the fourth, your breath arrives in sharp little pieces. But stopping? Not an option. The orchestra swells, the audience claps, and there is deep social shame in seeking a chair too soon. You remember overhearing someone once boast that a lady burned more calories in a ball than a man in a factory. It isn't true, of course, but here, under crystal light and watchful eyes, it feels true enough to be dangerous. In the corner, a woman sips champagne between dances and insists she hasn't eaten all day in preparation. A light body moves better, she giggles before being pulled back into the swirl. Another whispers that she dances through fever, for discipline. The night becomes a procession of songs with no mercy between them. Waltzes melt into polkas. Polkas give way to quadrilles. Quadrilles unravel into some frantic thing no one names. Servants pass around chilled cloths for flushed faces and slender glasses for parched throats. No one brings food. Calories are not welcome at the caloric ball. Near midnight, the floor grows slippery with sweat and fallen pins. A lady stumbles, another catches her, neither stops. Somewhere near the musician's stand you hear the soft thunder of a body meeting wood. The music does not. A hush almost forms, then dissolves. Fainting happens, someone whispers kindly as if it were rain. Later you spot the fallen woman again, seated upright on a chaise, cheeks pale as moonlight. She insists she's fine. Her gloves are clenched hard in her hands as though holding her together. By 2 a.m, your shoes are damp inside, your stockings greyed with effort. Your heart errs on the side of escape with every beat, and yet there's a wicked pleasure in it. To suffer beautifully, in harmony, under chandeliers. When the last note finally unravels, the applause is thunderous. Survivors clap for survivors. You smile with lips that feel not entirely yours. Outside, cold air cuts. You open and heals you all at once. You breathe in, deep and ragged. Your body trembles with the ghost of movement. Tomorrow, they'll all say it was splendid. They will not talk about the woman who didn't come back onto the floor. The next morning, your legs ache like they've been repurposed. You lie still in bed, watching light spill across the ceiling, and for a moment you don't know if your exhaustion is triumphant or just empty. You sit up slowly. Your gown from the night before lies draped across the chair, damp with effort. When you lift it, the scent of old sweat and violets lingers, a strange perfume of performance. You think of the chandelier's reflection on the parquet floor, the blur of dancers, the girl who fainted mid-quadrille. Her name was Miss Daltrey, someone tells you later. She'd been training for weeks, fasting all day, dancing every evening in her drawing room, drinking only lemon water. Her mother said proudly that she dropped 6 pounds in 10 days. She'll be fine, they add too quickly. It's just her nerves. But you see her a week later, seated at a different gathering. She's paler now, her cheeks hollow, her smile delayed by half a second. She doesn't speak unless spoken to, and when she does, her voice is thinner than her wrists. That's the secret cost of the caloric ball. It makes frailty a badge of honour, and yet the invitations keep arriving. You attend another. This time you prepare in earnest. No supper, no wine. A single spoonful of broth hours beforehand, and just enough rouge to colour your cheekbones. Your dancing slippers are already worn thin, and you consider that a good omen. The orchestra is even more punishing this time. They've started competing with one another, longer sets, faster tempos, fewer breaks. The host boasts of 3 collapses and not a single complaint. The crowd laughs. You do too, though your ribs feel brittle. A new detail appears, a small scale in the retiring room tucked behind a privacy screen. Ladies step onto it one by one, recording their weights in neat little notebooks, comparing notes, whispering strategies. "I lost 2 pounds during the waltz set," one says proudly. "Of course, I wore wool under my gown." Someone else pulls open her sleeve to show a rubber band pressed around her arm, a new trick to intensify sweating. "It burns more if it itches," she says, eyes wild with delight. The ball has become a competition, but no one says the word. The music drowns out protest. You keep going. Step, pivot, spin. Your vision blurs by midnight. The world narrows to movement and survival. You smile because you're supposed to. You dance because you're expected to. You push past your body's warning signs like everyone else in the room, because here, endurance is elegance, and collapse is applauded. At 2 a.m, you sit down in the dressing room and don't get back up. You're not unconscious. Not quite. Just detached. Your ears ring. Your skin tingles. You feel like you're floating an inch above the sofa, tethered only by the pin still stuck in your hair. Someone offers you water. Someone else offers smelling salts. You wave them both away. You just need a minute, or an hour, or a reason to keep doing this. And when you finally make it home, stepping out of the carriage with legs that don't entirely belong to you, you know, somewhere behind the aching joints and trembling hands, that you'll still go again. Because here, your worth is measured not in joy, but in how gracefully you endure the pain. The letter arrives on a morning glazed with frost. A thin blue envelope, a looping hand, an invitation that smells faintly of pine. Inside, only a line. "Cold is honest. Come learn." It's signed by a gentleman you met once at a caloric ball, the one who never perspired and always spoke as if winter were a personal virtue. So you go. Dawn finds you at the Serpentine with a small crowd of believers wrapped in blankets and bravado. The gentleman stands tall on the bank in a coat trimmed with fur, his breath a white sermon. "Warmth," he announces, "is indulgence. Cold, my dear friends, instructs the body to consume what it hoards." He gestures to the water. Someone yelps before they even touch it. You wade in after the others, teeth already clicking out a protest song your mind refuses to translate. The cold steals your feet first, then your calves, then your knees with a kind of efficiency only nature can manage. The water climbs your thighs and announces its arrival with pins and needles. Then silence. A numb silence that feels like floating in glass. 5 minutes, the gentleman calls, and breathe like you intend to keep the soul inside. You count heartbeats instead. This is the newest theory dressed as destiny. Ice awakens fat into flame. The belief travels by gossip and journals, by men who've crossed mountains and women desperate to shrink their shadows. Cold baths, they say, shock the system into burning excess. Cold walks before breakfast. Cold compresses on the belly. Cold rooms at night with the windows cracked just enough to invite misery in like a house guest. Afterwards, shivering becomes a badge. The women wrap in shawls and laugh too loudly as their bodies click and chatter back to life. Someone hands out cups of hot broth, only broth, and the warmth is so exquisite it almost hurts. You think perhaps that's the point. The walks come next. At 5 a.m, you meet by the commons in boots meant for summer and coats chosen for aesthetic sins rather than warmth. The air is a blade. The ground is a promise of falling. You march through mist while the gentleman lectures on metabolism as if it were a cathedral organ. Cold trims, he insists. It cuts appetite. It sharpens thought. You're not sure about thought, but it definitely cuts. Back home, you sleep with a window open against advice and reason. Frost kisses the inside of the glass. Your breath writes poems no one reads. You curl deeper beneath thin blankets because heavy ones confuse the body into comfort. That's what the pamphlet says anyway, or the one being passed around at tea with a nervous reverence. By the third night, you've learned new shades of awake, the kind that come from bones remembering winters they were never promised. And still, you lose. A pound here, another there. The gentleman nods when you tell him. Cold is a stern teacher, he says, but it is fair. He doesn't mention chilblains, or the cough beginning at the edges of your chest, or the way your fingers have started going colourless in the mornings like little flags of surrender. But the mirror likes you in blue, and so you obey the frost as politely as you once obeyed the corset. At first, the cold feels heroic. You wear your suffering like a medal pinned beneath wool. You tell stories of icy mornings as though they were grand adventures. Your breath's frost a proof of courage, your gooseflesh a badge of discipline. At breakfast tables, people admire your restraint as if it were a new shade of silk. You look so bracing, someone says. You look so alive, says another. You're cold. That is not the same thing. You begin taking notes. How long? How cold? How much you shiver? Like any faithful student, you record your own discomfort in tidy lines, as though tracking an enemy through snow. A minute longer in the bath today. One less shawl on tomorrow's walk. You congratulate yourself when your teeth chatter fast enough to count, but then the cold starts leaving gifts behind. Your skin cracks at the knuckles. Your lips split like dry earth. Your toes throb at night, a deep ache that feels carved, not grown. You rub them with beeswax and pretend it's enough. A woman shows you her ears one afternoon, raw, purpled. She laughs nervously and calls them learning curves. Another boasts that she's sleeping with only a sheet. To train thermogenic excellence. You ask what that means. She blinks and admits she doesn't know, only that it sounds thin. The gentleman keeps pushing. Longer dips, shorter coats, early walks in harder weather. He praises those who last, ignores those who don't. It's not cruelty, just arithmetic. The body, he insists, is a stubborn furnace. Starve it of warmth and it will consume itself. But sometimes furnaces crack. A rumour spreads. A woman who collapsed by Regent's Canal after only 10 minutes in the water. Another, confined to her room with fever. Someone whispers of a boy, an errand lad who joined a morning walk out of curiosity and didn't feel his hands again for days. When you mention this to the gentleman, he smiles. The body resists being perfected. That night, your cough deepens. It arrives with a hollow clang like someone tapping on your ribs from the inside. You sit up in bed, clutching a blanket you were supposed to avoid, and breathe steaming ghosts into the room. You're weak, the pamphlets say. You're undisciplined, the mirror whispers, but your bones say otherwise. You stay home one morning. You light a fire. You let warmth crawl back across your fingers and settle into your chest like an old friend. The relief is sudden and unholy. You actually moan, then laugh, then feel ashamed for laughing, as if comfort were a betrayal. When the gentleman sends word, you do not reply. Within a month, the winter walks thin out. People begin cancelling, quietly, one by one. Cold, it turns out, does not applaud loyalty. It only waits. You keep your window closed. You drink tea while it's still steaming. You do not learn from frost anymore. And though your weight creeps back in half pounds and whispers, something else returns too. Colour, warmth, silence without pain, which starts to feel luxurious. You don't realise at first how loudly the city is speaking to you, not in words, in ink. It happens innocently. You're at a bookstall, fingers grazing spines and pamphlets, when your eye catches a cartoon tacked to a board. A plump woman struggles through a doorway narrowly built to humiliate her. Beneath her, in looping letters, "When dinner wins." Someone chuckles behind you. You turn and walk on, cheeks warm, heart strangely sore. The Victorians don't miss a chance to draw a body smaller than life, especially if it's already too large for their liking. Newspapers, magazines, pamphlets, joke books, all teem with caricatures of the stout, the full-figured, the overindulged. Laughter is currency, and fat is the coin. At first it feels distant. The jokes are about other women, other men, other shapes. But then the faces start to look familiar. The posture in one cartoon resembles yours, the sleeves in another, the hair. You begin noticing the headlines. Epidemic of stoutness among ladies. The plump peril. Waists wide, morals wider. They frame it as concern. They sell it as comedy. But you read between the columns. You always have. One afternoon at a tea room, a girl brings the paper closer to your table. "Look at this one," she laughs, pointing to a sketch of a rotund duchess wedged into a carriage. You laugh too, because it's expected. But the sound catches halfway out. A young man nearby remarks, "A lady should never look like she enjoys luncheon." His companions agree. You sip your tea slowly. Nothing about these cartoons is accidental. They exaggerate bellies, shrink heads, enlarge hands gripping pastries like crimes. They make excess into villainy and thinness into heroism. They turn appetite into spectacle. Soon, it's everywhere. Ads for corsets mock undesirable bulges. Soap brands promise to wash away stoutness. Even theatre posters feature waifish leads and rotund fools. When a comedian takes the stage, the fat character is always the one who slips, sweats and fails. And the audience roars. You find a magazine one evening that includes a before and after panel, not of clothing, but of women. Left, labelled unrefined. Right, labelled corrected. You wonder what offence the before committed beyond existence. In your own home you start reading differently. Reviews praise singers not for their voice but for their slender silhouette. Novel heroines are described as petite first, clever second. Even villains grow fat while virtue grows slim. It's like the stories are eating away at you from the margins. You begin folding newspapers in half, then quarters, then you stop opening them altogether. But the comments still come. "Well, your face has grown rather serious. That's slimming, isn't it? You don't look like you did last year. I preferred you a little softer." The words travel lightly, they land heavily. By the time you're standing in front of the mirror again, you're not just seeing your reflection, you're seeing headlines. So you begin shrinking, not just in the body but in behaviour. You laugh a little less loudly. You chew a little more discreetly. You fold your hands neatly in your lap as if the stillness will carve you thinner. The city's jokes have become your own. You don't tell anyone about the morning spent standing sideways at the mirror, trying to decide which angle might earn you a kinder cartoon. You don't tell them how you read letters to the editor now, not for opinion, but for hints. What foods are being blamed, what virtues are being praised, what silhouettes are in fashion this fortnight. At a dinner party, a man next to you recounts a particularly brutal cartoon he saw in Punch. A woman so large, she's mistaken for the roast goose. He slaps the table laughing. You smile and excuse yourself. In the washroom you sit for 5 minutes just breathing. You're not alone in this. You start noticing the signs in others. A cousin picking up bread with military precision. A dressmaker apologising for her generous bust before every fitting. A woman across from you at tea who orders nothing and holds the menu like a shield. All of them, haunted by the same ink ghosts, laughing with the same thin mouths. Sometimes you wonder who drew the first cruel sketch, and how much they weighed. One day, in a dusty corner of a second-hand shop, you find a clipping saved under glass. It's different. A woman, round, soft-faced, standing proudly in a garden. The caption beneath doesn't mock. It simply says, Madame F. known for her wit, her roses, and her remarkable apple tarts. No measurements, no shame, just being. You stare at it longer than you mean to. Maybe someone kept it because they needed proof that joy didn't need permission. Or maybe they just liked roses. Either way, it feels like breathing room. That night you open the newspaper and tear out a cartoon. Not to keep, but to burn. The ink curls black and flees up the chimney. You feel strangely taller watching it go. You don't stop noticing the jokes, but you start refusing to be their punchline. Your appetite returns with something gentler than guilt. You begin reading novels that describe women by their laughter. You sketch your own before and after in a notebook, but this time it's just 2 drawings of yourself smiling in different dresses, and you let yourself enjoy luncheon. You savour the jam and the butter and the way the sunlight strikes your spoon just right. You sip tea like it's a ceremony. You remember Madame F. and her apple tarts, and you smile at your own reflection, not for what it hides, but for what it dares to show. Let the cartoons be ink, your warm bread and bright fruit, and a laugh that rings all the way down the table. You don't hear about the Hungarian powder until it's already in your house. A friend brings it, wrapped delicately in tissue, like a gift or a secret. She sets it down beside your mirror and smiles with too much excitement. They swear by it in Vienna, she says, eyes shining. All the dancers use it. You know better than to ask what's in it. That's not how these things work. The ingredients are always vague, always foreign-sounding enough to impress, but unfamiliar enough to escape scrutiny. You nod, politely curious, and unwrap the paper. It's a fine grey dust, later than flour, with a strange herbal scent, faintly floral, faintly bitter. The label says nothing helpful, for the gentle correction of shape. No dosage, no warning, just the promise of subtraction. The instructions, passed along by word of mouth, are clear. Mix a spoonful into tea every morning. Drink it on an empty stomach. Avoid cream, avoid bread. Wait. You hesitate for 3 days. Then, one morning, after pinching the soft curve beneath your corset for the 100th time, you stir it into your cup. It doesn't taste like much, just a ghost of chalk behind the Earl Grey. But your stomach notices. Within the hour you're flushed, jittery and vaguely nauseous. Your hands shake while buttering toast. You eat half and push the rest aside, unsettled. By lunch, the nausea turns to a hollow ache. By dinner, you're too tired to stand for long. Your dress feels looser, but so does your skin somehow. Still, the next day you do it again. This time, the powder feels familiar. You know when the trembling will start. You know when the wave of queasiness will crest and fade. You plan your day around it. You begin walking a little faster, speaking a little sharper. There's a nervous energy that feels like control, like your body's working hard just to stay alive. By the end of the week, your appetite has vanished. Food becomes theory. Flavours blur. All that matters is the way your skirts feel lighter, your shoes a little looser, a belt notch, a new silhouette in the mirror, tiny victories with invisible costs. You see your friend again. She notices immediately. You look sharper, she says. It's not quite a compliment. More like an observation made through squinted eyes. Are you still using the powder? You nod. She hesitates. I stopped, she confesses, dropping her voice. It did something to my breathing, and my gums, they bled. You smile politely. Inside, you feel the churn begin again. One morning, the teacup slips from your hands and shatters. You can't explain why. Your fingers just missed. You stare at the fragments on the floor and feel nothing. No startle, no worry, just an odd, calm detachment, like you're watching a scene from a distance. That evening, you open the tissue paper again and notice something new. Tiny black specks in the powder. Mould? Ash? You can't be sure. Still, you tip the spoon. It's too late to stop now. A week later, you wake with a pounding behind your eyes and a throat so dry it crackles when you swallow. You reach for your teacup. Habit. But your hand doesn't quite reach the saucer before your vision goes dark at the edges. You steady yourself on the wall, heart skipping like a faulty metronome. You've lost more weight, that much is certain. Your corset bites into you differently now, angles where curves used to be. But there's no triumph in it anymore, just calculation. How long you can walk before the trembling begins, how much broth you can sip before your stomach revolts, whether you can sit through church without fainting. You open your journal and scribble a line to track the changes. The pages have become a quiet obsession, lines of weight, waist, pulse, and days since the last real meal. There's a satisfaction to the numbers, cold and unfeeling. They don't lie, they don't judge, they simply mark your descent like notches on a shipwreck. And then one morning, the powder is gone. Not finished, just gone. You search every drawer, every fold of tissue paper. It's vanished without a trace. No explanation, no farewell, just absence. Panic sets in. Not fear of gaining weight again, but fear of no longer controlling it. You skip breakfast, then lunch, but without the powder, your body remembers hunger. It growls at you. It pleads. You give in at twilight, devouring a heel of bread like it's contraband. The taste is glorious and guilt-ridden. You imagine the powder watching you, somewhere in its dusty, vanished form, disappointed, betrayed. That night, you dream of ink-stained menus and hollowed cheeks. You dream of dancers collapsing backstage, of corsets drawn until ribs creak, of powdered tea steeped in desperation. You wake with the taste of metal in your mouth and your fingertips tingling. You visit the woman who gave you the powder. She looks worse than you remember. "I don't have any more," she says before you even ask. Her voice is thin, her skin grey in the wrong light. "But you shouldn't..." She stops, shakes her head. It doesn't stop where you think it will. You sit in silence. After a while, she says quietly, "There's something else. They say the powder. Well, it might have been a mix, belladonna, wormwood, even powdered glass." You laugh softly. Of course it was. You don't try to find more. Instead, you sleep. A lot. Your body begins to come back slowly, like a guest returning after a storm. Your hair thickens, your lips flush. You can smell oranges again, and cinnamon, and the world's sharp little pleasures. And when someone remarks, "You filled out again, haven't you?" you just nod. Because yes, you have. You filled out the space that belongs to you, and no powder in a porcelain spoon will ever shrink you again. The first time you hear the term reducing corset, it sounds like a contradiction. Isn't every corset for reducing? But then you see one, not the satin kind laced prettily for the ballroom, not the dainty underthings a lady's maid draws up each morning. No, this one is cruel. All metal, leather and straps. Less garment, more restraint. It arrives in a black box from London, lined in tissue, smelling faintly of cold steel and lavender. Your neighbour unwraps it with reverence, her hands trembling slightly. She's read about it in the Lady's Companion, where a society wife reportedly lost 4 inches in a fortnight. Her husband had ordered it for her. A surprise. You look at the thing with quiet horror. There are no soft edges, no fabric roses, just rivets, thick busks and laces that threaten to draw breath from your ribs whether you offer it or not. It's marketed as the silent tutor of discipline. The copy even brags it is capable of dissuading appetite by pressure alone. Your neighbour insists you try it on. You hesitate, but she's already unfastening your bodice with the kind of urgency usually reserved for emergencies or gossip, and before you know it, your arms are raised, your underdress peeled back, and the contraption is being wound around your middle like a knight's armour. It doesn't close. "Exhale," she says sweetly. You do. The corset groans. You feel something shift inside your chest. Not painfully, not yet, but like a warning, a protest, a held breath that never ends. Your vision narrows slightly, but you smile anyway. For the next half hour you walk the drawing room like a doll being puppeted. Your spine is arrow straight, your waist cinched to near fiction. You cannot sit, you cannot sigh. You speak in clipped phrases shallow enough to avoid fainting. Your neighbour is beaming. "You look so elegant," she says. "And just imagine," they say with daily wear the stomach begins to adapt, shrinks to fit the space you give it. You nod, though the room seems far away. The corset does not come off easily. The laces resist. You have to lean against the armoire as she tugs and curses softly. When it finally gives, the sensation is dizzying, like suddenly remembering how to breathe. Your waist is red with pressure marks. Later that evening, alone, you run your fingers over the bruises, and yet you order one the next day, a smaller size, because the ad promised it could make hunger uncomfortable, a punishment for disobedient cravings. You wonder if that's what it takes. Soon your life reshapes around the corset. You wake earlier to lace it before breakfast. You eat standing up. Sitting is near impossible. You speak less. Your voice is thinner, like it too has been cinched. You don't notice how little you're eating until your maid comments that the pantry's barely been touched. You waver off with a vague excuse about lightness and clarity. But even as you say the words, you feel faint. Still, when the corset closes with ease on the tightest notch a week later, you smile. A slow, dangerous smile. Days pass to the rhythm of laces. Each morning you stand before the mirror and offer your breath to the metal like a small surrender. Inhale. Loosen. Exhale. Pull. The corset learns your body the way a lock learns its key. It remembers where you soften, where you resist, where you flicker with hope and give up again. You stop wearing it for audiences. This is no longer for display. It is discipline. At breakfast you sip tea because chewing feels rude to your ribs. At luncheon you pretend not to be hungry because hunger is now a private failure. At supper you listen to the clink of cutlery and imagine each sound as something you no longer require. The corset seems to approve. It holds. It tightens. It becomes a stern companion you don't dare disappoint. Around you, other women are discovering the same device. Word spreads not in newspapers but in corridors and cloakrooms, passed like a secret prayer. A new etiquette grows around it. No slouching, no sighing, no sudden laughter. A woman should be composed at all times, and giddy only in the mind, never the flesh. You hear of a woman whose corset pinched a rib so sharply she fainted at a musicale and woke to applause. You hear of another who slept in hers and woke unable to sit straight, as if her spine had decided it preferred obedience. You hear everything, and you wear yours anyway. Your body tries to argue. Some days it sends you dizziness, other days a strange buzzing warmth behind your eyes. Once, halfway up the staircase, your legs forget what they're meant to do, and you sit down right where you are, stiff, awkward, breathing in short, embarrassed attempts. You call it fatigue. You call it refinement. The corset whispers something else with every click of bone and strain of breath. You are learning. A physician, an old friend of the family, visits unexpectedly one afternoon. He eyes your posture, the way your shoulders hover unnaturally back, the way your breaths arrive in timid parcels. He asks questions you answer with beautiful lies. Eating well? Of course. Any discomfort? Only the weather. He reaches out, gently presses along your ribcage and frowns. This is a prison, he says under his breath, not unkindly. Bodies are not meant to be taught like letters. You laugh it off. You mention fashion. You call it structure. He looks unconvinced. After he leaves, you tighten the corset one notch further, as if to punish the warning right out of yourself. And yet, at night, when you finally unbuckle, the relief is immediate and indecent. Your chest expands like a confession. You sit on the edge of the bed and let gravity exist again. You breathe until the room stops looking like a tunnel. Sometimes you cry, not loudly, just enough to vent the night. And then, one morning, the bottom latch refuses to close. No matter how you exhale, it resists, a stubborn mouth refusing to seal. You pull harder. You try again. Your hands shake with panic and effort, but the metal does not move. The mirror shows you a body not smaller, just alive. You sit down and breathe, long, deep, unruly, and for the first time since the corset arrived, you imagine not shrinking, but leaving. You think you've seen every trick by now. Sweat, straps, tonics, sermons, machines and powders and ice baths. Surely the catalogue of suffering has run dry. Then someone invites you to a retreat, not a spa, not a holiday, a health colony. The brochure is printed on thick cream paper, stamped with green ivy along the borders. It promises discipline, simplicity, and the rediscovery of vigour through honest labour. The name at the bottom is new to you, but the tone is not. It is the voice of people who believe deprivation is a form of character. You arrive by train in the early morning, your breath fogging the window as fields roll past. When you step onto the platform, a man in a plain brown coat greets you with a nod and takes your luggage before you can protest. He does not smile. The retreat lies just beyond a cluster of trees, a collection of low brick buildings surrounded by icy gardens and churned earth. No flowers, only cabbages. No music, only the sound of wind in bare branches. Welcome to the place where wealthy people go to be poor on purpose. The rules are given in a pamphlet. No titles, no mirrors, no servants. You will rise at dawn, work until noon, eat simply, and walk in silence. Your bed will be hard, your meals thin, the air bracing, complaints unnecessary. The schedule is bolded, 6 a.m. Cold wash, 6:30, labour 12. Meal 1, lecture 3, more labour. 7, broth 8. Rest. You wonder how this differs from punishment. By 7:20 you're already in the garden with a hoe in your hands and frost on your boots. Your arms aren't used to this. Neither is your back. The soil is stiff and stubborn, like it doubts your sincerity. Around you, other guests labour without ceremony. A banker pulls weeds. A woman with hands soft as roses scrubs pots until they squeak. No one speaks. The air smells like wet earth and regret. At noon, lunch is served. It is a plate of boiled vegetables and a slice of coarse brown bread. No butter, no salt, no sugar. A cup of something calling itself tea. Pale as apology. You eat it all. It is the best meal you've had in weeks, and immediately you hate yourself for it. The lectures come next. A man with ironed cuffs and sharp cheekbones speaks of indulgence as disease. He describes the modern body as bloated by comfort and cured only through labour. The poor understand restraint, he declares. We must learn it from them. The irony settles in your chest like a stone. You look around the room and see carefully starved faces nodding in agreement. Afterward, it's back to work, scrubbing floors, hauling water, chopping wood. By the time dusk arrives, your fingers ache and your arms tremble. Sweat trickles down your neck beneath a sky that does not care what you paid to be here. Dinner is broth. It is almost clear. You drink it slowly. You go to bed that night in a narrow room with a mattress that resents you. The sheets smell of soap and centuries. The air stings your lungs. You curl into yourself and listen to the building sigh around you. Timber expanding, bricks clicking like old knees. And in that fragile quiet, you understand. This is not a retreat. It is a performance of poverty, and you bought a ticket. Morning arrives like an order. A bell rings through the corridor at 6 sharp, cold and merciless. You sit up too quickly and the room spins, not with dreams, but with yesterday's labour still lodged in your joints. The window is rimmed with frost. Your breath rises in pale little ghosts. You dress without looking at yourself, because here mirrors are forbidden. Vanity, they say, is a disease of comfort. Downstairs, you're handed a tin basin of icy water and told to wash your face and arms in it. No one flinches, you do. The cold slices into your skin like truth. It steals warmth from wherever you're hiding it and leaves you blinking, aching, and suddenly very awake. A woman beside you gasps and then straightens her back as if obeying instinct alone. There is a quiet competition in endurance. Breakfast is not served. Instead, you are sent to split wood. Your muscles protest, loudly. Your palms burn. The axe handle slips in your damp grip, and once you nearly lose a toe. But something strange happens as the hour passes. Your mind fades from you. Hunger roars, then quiets. Pain blurs into rhythm. You're not thin here. You're tired. And it's the cleanest exhaustion you've felt in years. At noon, the dining hall fills with the sound of spoons against bowls. Today's meal is cabbage broth and half an apple. No one complains. No one lingers. This is not a place for talking. It is a place for obeying. During the lecture, you learn that fat is not just a flaw. It is a moral failing. The speaker calls it stored selfishness. He claims labour burns not just calories but character defects. Women nod as though their shoulders haven't already collapsed from hours of hauling water. By the 5th day, your arms have bruises shaped like buckets. Your waist has changed. You can feel it in the way your dress slips, in the way your bones begin to announce themselves. You should be pleased. But something else is shrinking too. Your patience, your humour, your sense of time. You overhear a woman crying in the washroom at dawn. She presses a handkerchief to her mouth and whispers that she hasn't dreamed in days. Another tells you she came to the colony to regain control and now feels she's been turned into something useful instead of human. And then there are the disappearances. A man leaves after collapsing in the garden. A woman is sent home to rest. Though no one uses the word fainted, you hear it in the whispers anyway. Each absence is treated like a stain miscarried by discipline. On the 7th night, the director announces a rule change. Only broth until further notice. Some people cheer. That's when it hits you. This place isn't about health. It isn't even about diet. It's about erasure, about scraping away comfort until nothing soft remains, about replacing pleasure with permission, about calling exhaustion purity. You pack quietly at dawn. The man in the brown coat meets you at the gate and stares for a moment, searching your face for guilt. He finds none. He hands you your suitcase without a word. The train ride back feels unreal. Heat in the carriage, a woman laughing 3 seats away, the smell of warm pastries from the station cafe drifting through the door. Your hands shake when you buy one. You eat it slowly, not counting, not apologising, just tasting. And in that small rebellion, you realise. Hardship does not make you virtuous. It only makes you tired. You hear about her before you meet her. Lovely thing, really, someone murmurs at luncheon. Just faded, that's all. Like lace left too long in the sun, another adds. Her name is Eleanor Ashcombe. Once she was everywhere. On staircases wrapped in silk, in theatre boxes with opera glasses lifted just so, in gardens laughing louder than was proper and getting away with it anyway. She had been admired not only for her beauty, but for her appetite, for stories, for music, for late nights and second desserts. People said she lived like summer, but now she lives like paper. You finally see her at a small afternoon recurrence. Not a party, not quite a meeting, just a polite obligation among people who don't know how to be casual anymore. She sits near the window with a shawl over her shoulders, though the room is warm. She looks narrow. Not elegantly so, carefully so, as if she were the rough draft of herself. When you greet her, she smiles politely and tilts her head. The movement costs her something. You see it in the micropause before she answers you. The blink that arrives a fraction of a second too late. You look well, she says. You suspect she means thinner. You sit beside her and the bones in her wrist brush your sleeve. The contact startles you, not because of shock, but because of absence. There is so little left of her. She tells you she's been quiet these days, that she tires easily, that she finds it peaceful. You nod in the same way people nod when a story begins to lean. Someone brings tea. Eleanor does not drink. She just wraps her hands around the cup and breathes in the steam like a prayer. Later, as the room thins out, she confesses something with a sideways smile. I was so afraid of becoming forgettable, she says softly. Then I overcorrected. She doesn't explain. She doesn't have to. You walk her home through drifting autumn leaves. She tires within 2 blocks and leans on your arm. Not heavily, carefully, as if she's afraid of occupying space. At her door she hesitates, then invites you in. The flat is immaculate. Too immaculate. Nothing is out of place because nothing has been touched. No crumbs, no dishes, no folded scarves. Even the flowers in the vase are artificial. Silk roses that never wilt because nothing real has been allowed to. She sinks into a chair and closes her eyes for a moment. I followed everything, she says. Everything they printed. Everything they praised. Everything they punished. There is no anger in her voice. Just bewilderment. I thought I'd feel arrived by now, she whispers, but I feel unfinished. She allows herself one embarrassment, a tear that refuses to fall all the way. It rests at the edge of her eye like it too is too tired to continue. You take her hand. She feels cold inside warm skin. She apologizes for that. And something inside you breaks quietly, like frost underfoot. You visit Eleanor again, the following week. Not out of obligation, but because something about her haunts you. The way a melody gets stuck in your chest even if you can't name the song. She welcomes you in with a nod, not a smile. Her face is calm, composed, but there's an effort behind it now, like a curtain held up with pins. She's wearing the same shawl. You notice the faint impression of her collarbone beneath the fabric, like a shadow someone forgot to erase. Her dress fits awkwardly, no longer flattering, just empty in places. She offers you tea again, but doesn't take any herself. I only take broth these days, she says lightly, very cleansing. You don't comment. She walks slowly, as if gravity has gained a personal interest in her. But her voice remains sharp, articulate, elegant, a trace of the Eleanor who used to fill every room. You glance at the bookshelf and spot titles that echo old regimes of virtue. The fasting cure, moral control through diet, the womanly path to purity. They sit beside a lace-bound notebook filled with dates, numbers, careful measurements, not of money, of her own body. She shows you the list like someone might show you heirlooms. Waist, 21 inches. Breakfast, none. Midday, clear broth, 6 ounces. Evening, walk to the park bench and back. Each note is a tiny monument to vanishing. The more she erases, the more control she believes she's gained. You realise this has never been about beauty. Not truly. It's about control in a world where women had so little. A world where silence, stillness, and self-denial were seen as graceful. To shrink was to be noble. And Eleanor? She's becoming saintly. But saints are often close to death. That afternoon she asks if you'll help her into bed. It's only 3 o'clock. She tires easily now. Her mattress is hard and narrow. Her blanket barely rustles. When she lies down, it's as if the room absorbs her shape without a sound. Her breathing is light, controlled, practiced. Before you leave, she says, "Don't let them convince you that emptiness is elegance." It's the first thing she said that doesn't sound like it came from a pamphlet. Outside, the city is preparing for winter. Shops are closing early. Lamps glow amber in the fog. You pass windows where laughter lives, where children press faces to the glass for sweets, where women knit scarves that are far too bright for mourning. And in that quiet street, you understand what Eleanor never said aloud. She didn't just lose weight. She lost warmth. She lost joy. She lost the right to take up space. And no one stopped her because they mistook her fading for refinement. You walk home heavier than when you arrived, not with guilt, but with knowing. And you promise, softly, secretly, to eat something rich that night. Something Eleanor would have once adored. A plum tart, a sugared bun, a hot meal that doesn't apologize for being enough. You do it not in protest, but in memory of the girl who once laughed in gardens and the woman who forgot she was allowed to. Morning arrives without ceremony. No invitation card, no lecture hall, no glass vial waiting by the bedside. Just the ordinary light creeping across the wall like it always has, unconcerned with how small or large you feel inside it. You wake with Eleanor on your mind, not as she is now, but as she was, all laughter and movement and easy appetite, the version of her no pamphlet could allow. You make tea and sit by the window, and for the first time in a long while, you let the cup be exactly what it is, warm. You drink without measuring, without counting, without apology. It feels wrong, and then it feels right. You begin taking walks again, not the punishing kind, not the frost-carved marches or ritual circuits, but real ones, meandering ones. You stop when you're tired, you sit when you're hungry, you buy a sugared cake from a street cart simply because the smell wins. No one applauds, no one scolds. The city keeps breathing. You begin noticing something that was always there but never loud enough. Most people are not thin. They are soft in places and sharp in others. They move at odd paces. They eat erratically. They age unevenly. And yet, somehow, they live. You watch a woman with flour on her apron laugh so hard she has to lean against a doorframe. You see a man with a belly round as a kettle stroll down the pavement, hand in hand with someone who looks at him like he hung the stars. It occurs to you gently and all at once that the world is not arranged around shape. It never was. What was arranged was the judging. You begin reading differently. You ignore the columns that promise subtraction and turn instead to stories that promise more weather, more gardens, more ordinary wonder. In the shop windows you start to admire scarves not for how they disguise, but for how they dare to be bright. You try one on in a red that would have scandalized your old reflection. It suits you, not in the mirror, but in the chest. And then, somewhere between buying a basket of clementines and tearing old magazine pages into kindling, it dawns on you. None of it worked. Not really. The steam didn't melt anything but patience. The corsets made you smaller, but only in breath. The powders stole quiet. The elixirs stole sleep. The baths stole warmth. The dances stole strength. The belt stole movement. And the sermons stole mercy. You think of Eleanor, and you know this for certain. The body always collects its debts. It does so slowly and without fuss. You can disguise them as virtue for years, but eventually they arrive with interest. You write her a letter that evening, not advice, not platitudes, just a memory. The day she climbed a tree in a silk gown because someone dared her to. You describe how she laughed when a branch snapped and how the gardener applauded. You tell her the city still smells of apples in autumn, that the bakers are using nutmeg again, that the roses by the canal have come back an impossible red. You say, I remember you full of life. I still do. And you mean full not in size, but in colour. The weeks stretch on, as weeks do. Nothing dramatic happens. No newspaper scandal, no sudden reform, no outcry about corset deaths or biscuit pills. The world doesn't erupt in revelation. It just goes on, as it always has. But you notice a quiet shift. The women at the dressmakers no longer whisper when their laces won't close. They laugh instead, rolling their eyes at rich lunches and tighter waists. The tailor begins offering more generous cuts, calling them walking dresses with a wink. Even the advertisements begin to soften. Not entirely, not honestly, but enough. Nourishing, they begin to say. Reviving. It's not rebellion, but it is relief. One day, you pass a small bookshop with a sign in the window that reads, "Life is not a contest of vanishing." The lettering is hand-painted, crooked and stubborn. You pause, and for the first time you don't feel like a visitor to your own skin. You think about all the strange things the Victorians did in pursuit of thinness. The chalk, the vinegar, the constant movement, the constant denial, the desperate little promises of purity and perfection. You used to think they were strange. Now you understand. They were just afraid of aging, of wanting too much, of being looked at wrong, of being forgotten. So they traded joy for etiquette, hunger for approval, colour for faint praise, and yet, underneath it all, the rotund aunt who laughed too loudly, the housemaid who snuck scones, the widow who wore velvet in July, there were always rebels, quiet ones. Maybe you're one now too. You write to Eleanor again. Just a short note this time. You tell her, you don't need to finish vanishing to be seen, and you tuck inside a photograph, a small one. Just you at a garden table smiling. Tea in one hand, half-eaten tart in the other, crumbs visible. The breeze caught your hair in a very unladylike way, and the light caught your face before you could pose. You looked alive. You looked present. You send it without a return address, because this isn't about reply, it's about remembrance. That night you walk barefoot across the wooden floor. You light a candle and let it flicker without purpose. You open the windows and listen for rain that hasn't arrived. You unpin your hair. You unhook your expectations. You pour warm milk with a dash of honey. You drink slowly, and you whisper, to no one in particular, to yourself, to the past. Enough, not as a limit, but as an arrival. You are enough. The house doesn't respond, but it doesn't need to, because you sleep that night without tightening anything, without cleansing, without apology, and in the morning you wake whole, not smaller, just whole. You've come so far tonight, through steam baths and corset strings, through chalk pills and silent breakfasts, through the dim parlour where Eleanor sat and the streets where rebels walked in velvet and cinnamon. You've wandered through a time that whispered constantly, less is better, and you've seen what that whisper can take from someone. But here you are, breathing gently now. The night has folded itself around you. The blankets feel a little softer. the air a little kinder. There's nothing left to shrink into, no pages to measure yourself against, no voice except the one that says, rest. Maybe that's the most radical thing you can do. Not disappear, not perfect, just rest. Let the stories of the past drift backward, like candle smoke curling through an open window. Let the images settle, Eleanor's shawl, the crooked shop sign, the taste of sugared tea you never had but somehow remember. Let it all blur gently, because right now there's nowhere to go, nothing to prove. You've heard the strange, sad truths of the past. You've carried them, and now you're allowed to set them down. Close your eyes, let your breath come easy. You're not an era. You're not a weight. You're not a number. You're a warm body in a soft bed, and that is a good place to be.